Hello and welcome back. So I'm gonna continue going into my info that I gave, the speech that I gave. Um, so yeah, let's begin. Of course, there is more to witchcraft than casting spells and divining the future. We also have a belief system, as all religions do. There are old laws in the craft, including a level of secrecy, the roles of high priest and priestess, and morality among the priesthood. So, the belief system that I'm talking about, um, it's a little bit general. So, the majority of Alexandrian and Gardnerians work with the horn god and the moon goddess in some form. Once you're initiated, you work with there is a secret name to the god and the goddess. And if you're not an initiate, you don't get to know this name. I don't know this name. Um, um, yeah, so there are more specific beliefs that can vary based on traditions, based on lineage, based on the person. So for me to say that we have a belief system, it's true, but also not perfect. The old laws, they're published. Um, there are parts of the Book of Shadows, which the Book of Shadows is a grimoire. So the Book of Shadows and the terms the Book of Shadows and the grimoire have been thrown around. Sometimes they're interchanged, sometimes they're very specific. But the Book of Shadows is it's a running document of the rituals and the liturgy um, of the Gardnerian Alexandrian traditions. They vary slightly, again, based on lineage and tradition, but it's the same core information. Um, there have been people who have published parts of the Book of Shadows, and these people are called oath breakers because, as I mentioned, including a level of secrecy, um, once you're initiated, you take oaths that you're not going to share the secrets of the craft. There are parts that you can share, like there's obviously a goddess there, etc. But as for secrets that you learn in the circle, you're not supposed to share them. And so, and especially the Book of Shadows, because it is so precious, you cannot share it, but people do, and those people are called oath breakers. And I believe, like I've read parts of the Book of Shadows that have been published just because I'm interested. I'm a bit nosy. Um, but something about suffering in the hell of the Christians if you break your oaths. Whether that's true or whether that's something that Gardner invented, not sure. Um, an actual priest or priestess would probably know more about that because the laws belong to the priesthood. Um, I think I just touched on the level of secrecy too. The roles of high priest and priestess. Um, the high priest and the priestess are the leaders of the coven, so they run the rituals, they teach the rest of the initiates, um, and morality among the priesthood. In general, this kind of is touched on with the Witch's Creed that I'm about to go into. But yeah, the high priest and priestess run the coven. They teach the initiates. And speaking of the initiates, when you're initiated, you are initiated as a witch and a priest or a priestess. Um, so there's the first degree initiation where you're initiated as a priest or priestess. The second degree, um, which I believe you become a high priest in your second degree. I'm not totally familiar with the second degree because I focus more on Alexandrian tradition. Um, Gardnerians separate second degree and the third degree, and it's a bit more based on control. Um, so it's about separating the leaders from the students. So it takes a little bit more time, as far as I'm aware, to rise to the high priesthood, and to be able to hive off and form your own coven. But in Alexandrian tradition, they put the two degrees together. So you take your second and third degree initiation at the same time. Um, yeah, so high priest and priestess. Yeah. One law that is typically followed by many witches is called the Wiccan Read, which states 8 words the Wiccan Read fulfill, and it harm none, do it ye will. This can be restated in modern English as 8 words the witch's creed fulfill, if it harm none, do it ye will. So, as I discussed in the last video and earlier in the speech, Wicca, properly pronounced as Wicca, is the old word for the wise people. So, and a read is an older word for creed, like the Apostles' Creed. And it's not a law, it's a word of advice, which I touch on in a second. Um, It must be remembered that a read or a creed is not a law, it's a word of advice. It's a good idea not to cause harm to others, but it's not required. The same as it's a good idea to tie your shoes before crossing the street. You can cross with untied laces and you'll probably make it just fine, but you might trip. And I forgot to state, but Brian Kane, who I mentioned, he is the one who kind of points out um, the Witch's Creed part of it, the modern English version. Um, and then the part about the untied laces, I'm pretty sure that goes back to the former Alexandrian priest I mentioned with the reaction video to the BuzzFeed video. I still need to contact him and make sure it's okay if I say his name, because I don't want to share anyone's name if they're not okay with it. So that's why I'm just referring to him as the former Alexandrian priest. Yeah. Witchcraft is a lunar based fertility cult. In the old days, the witches used their magic to heal the sick, assist in childbirth, and to make the crops grow. Nowadays, as we have more advanced technology to assist in healing, childbirth, and agriculture, fertility is often a means of manifesting your life and empowering yourself and others. Aside from this breed of magic, there is a worshipful aspect of magic. Witches worship 2 primary deities, a horned god and moon goddess. Witchcraft is often called the old religion, and this is because our practices are influenced by the ancient people worshipping the first god and goddess archetypes ever known. So I'll stop there. I think the beginning of that was pretty self-explanatory. It's a lunar-based fertility cult. And some people don't like the term cult, but that's what it is. It's much more acceptable as a cult, versus any other cults like the KKK or something. But essentially, it's a cult, with the initiation and the secrecy. Okay, so there's a difference between thaumaturgy and theurgy. Theurgy is the act of magic that brings you closer to the divine. Thaumaturgy is work that is done more on the earthly plane, and it's used to it's more like what we call spell work. Um, so once you're initiated, you do a lot more theurgic work. Um, so the way I'm going to remember this from now on is that theurgy sounds like clergy, and clergy are the priests and priestesses of a religion. So when I say that fertility is often a means of manifesting your life and empowering yourself and others, that's thaumaturgy. Aside from this breed of magic, there is a worshipful aspect of magic. That is thaumaturgy. The old religion, now that I'm reading this, I don't actually know who calls it the old religion. The practices are influenced by ancient people, definitely. It's a revival tradition. There are some people who believe that the lines of witchcraft started by Gerald go all the way back to the olden days, the ancient times. Don't know if that's necessarily true. Some people believe that Gardner just kind of formed together a group and made it so because he he was a little bit of a dramatist. So it's it's up for debate whether or not the ancient traditions are actually tied to the modern movement of witchcraft. So I believe one of the oldest forms of the horned god that was ever seen is from the Gundestrup cauldron, and that is where Carnunos is seen. He is holding a snake in one hand and a torque in the other, and he is wearing the horns and surrounded by different animals. And then another form of the goddess is the Venus of Willendorf. That is the oldest goddess statue that was ever found. And I can include links to both of those images in the description. But those are the first archetypes that we know of. The god of witchcraft is depicted with horns because the ancient people were hunters and gatherers. The animals hunted for meat were often horned creatures sacrificed in the name of God. As these creatures were horned, it makes sense that their god would be horned as well. It's true the Christian. Oh, sorry. So this part about hunters and gatherers, this is referenced specifically from Raymond Buckland. I'm pretty sure he was British. Now that, yeah, um, but he was trained by Lady Olwyn, Monique Wilson, who I touch on. Um, he was trained by Lady Olwyn, moved to America, and um, he has his downlines from there. But there's an interview, I think it's called Witchcraft for Today and Tomorrow. I can also include that. And pretty cool interview. He also has a book called Raymond Buckland's Complete Book of Witchcraft. I'm thinking of the title that most people gave, which is Uncle Bucky's Big Blue. Um, some people call it Uncle Bucky's Big Blue Abomination. To each their own. It's true the Christian devil is also seen with horns, but this is really because the church wanted to root out paganism. So the god of the old religion became the devil of the new. That is kind of said by a couple of people. So I think it's said by a couple of people in the Alexandrian tradition, also by Raymond Buckland. So I don't know who exactly to reference there, but that's not my initial wording. So I just want to say that. Throughout the Old Testament, rather, is seen as something evil, horns were a symbol of God given power. In fact, there is a statue of Moses in the Vatican where he is depicted with horns. So, this is also referenced in the last video. The Stuart Farrer said this in his interview. Alongside this god, we just recognize the moon goddess. As the moon operates on a 28-day cycle, it makes sense that the moon will be connected to a woman's menstrual cycle and divine feminine figure. The moon is the mother of witches, influencing all creatures of the earth as the light waxes and wanes. Witches also believe in the idea of reincarnation. Where there is life, there is death, and from death we are reborn. Through the cycle of life, our souls grow and develop, and when our souls pass, we are given another life in which we see the challenges we need to face and the lessons we have yet to learn. So, the part about the challenges we need to face and lessons we have yet to learn, also from Stuart Farrer. And I don't believe all witches believe in reincarnation. It's just a vast majority of them. But yeah, that ends part 2. Or, I think we're on part 3. Yeah, we're on part 3. So I will continue with part 4 shortly. Thank you for watching. Blessed be.